Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Dicebreaker podcast, our new weekly podcast coming out every Friday or as close to Friday as we can make it.
I.e. never again.
We'll be joined by some of the Dicebreaker team each week. I'm Matt Jarvis, I'm the editor-in-chief of Dicebreaker, and this week I am joined by three more of the team. Let's go through them. I am joined by Johnny Chiodini.
Hello. I'm Johnny Chiodini. Yeah, hi. It's nice to be here. I'm the head of video for anyone who doesn't know that already. And that's about all. Yeah, hi.
And we're also joined by Alex Meehan.
Hello, I am Alex Meehan. I am a staff writer for Dicebreaker and the wonderful Mr. Jarvis.
And finally, we have Wheels and Cat.
And Toto. Hello, I'm Michael Whelan-Wheels. Michael Whelan, also known as Wheels. I'm one of the video producers that works at Johnny. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I've just realised the cat's really not going to play on audio, so if you could just purr into the microphone every now and then, just to give
I am stroking him, so I'm hoping it will get picked up at least slightly.
If you hear any kind of like banshee-ish yowling in the background, that's probably my cat.
If it sounds like someone's having their soul ripped out of them.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, thanks for joining. How are you all doing in this ongoing time? So for anyone listening in the future, we're currently in the middle of the UK's lockdown because of the coronavirus. So we hope everyone's staying safe out there. And
technically, Matt, everyone who's listening will be in the future. So
in the far future, where everyone has hover cars.
Mm-hmm. i.e. 1 week from today.
Not doing bad. Thank you for asking.
All right, let's get into it. It's a bit of a funny time to be launching a board game podcast because playing board games suddenly extremely difficult unless you happen to have a regular group in your house. But we've been finding ways. So let's start with you, Johnny. Johnny, what have you been playing this week?
I have gone back to an absolute stone cold classic. I picked up Love Letter on Steam for about £2. And I would have to say, because I mostly do my my sort of board gaming in a pub, because my friends and I, we don't all live together, so we sort of meet near each other rather. So we all sort of meet in a pub that's convenient for all of us. And I have to say that gave me the experience since I went on lockdown that felt most like being in a pub, because we were playing Love Letter while also having a voice call and just yelling at each other. It is a very basic design for Love Letter, but it does the job and brings an absolute classic to the digital realm quite nicely. And it has a little chat wheel like Hearthstone, and you can call people a ninny hammer if you want. So game of the year, frankly.
For some reason, when I hear Ninny Hammer, I think of like a Warhammer unit, and I don't know what that looks like.
They're probably.
I feel like it's Goblin-esque.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like Gloomspite Gits or something like that.
Ninny Hammers.
It's worth saying that Love Letter, you can get it for free at the moment. The card game, as long as you have a printer to print it out, they put out a version of it, which is they put it out as an April Fool's Day joke, and it's kind of themed around online dating. So there's like #NoFilter. And stuff like that, but it's still the game.
The fun thing about Love Letter is that you could probably, if you know what the cards are, then you could probably just draw up your own set. To be honest, it's kind of like Skull, where it's like Skull was kind of designed so that you could play it with beer mats. It's very much just minimal amount of things required before you can actually just get to the game and play it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if you got like a pack of playing cards and just decided this is that and that's that.
Yeah,
3 red cards, 1 black card. That's Skull.
And then you get the opportunity to draw your own pictures of the characters from Love Letter, which, I might do myself and maybe reveal the results on Twitter.
I think I would give the princess a more robustly designed dress. Because the thing about the digital version is they've animated the cards, and the breathing is they just sort of expand the torso and then contract it again. And it honestly looks like the princess is going to explode out of her dress.
The heaving bosoms.
Exactly. A ditto the
very
courtesan.
romantic. situations.
There's nothing romantic about inadequate back support and potential mishaps. I care about her well-being. That's why I'm writing a letter to her.
She's so excited about all the different people who want to marry her. You know, you can't help it.
Yes, I'm sure she's very excited.
So anyway, that's what I'm playing.
I think Batman Love Letter has always been my favourite for many reasons, although the one that adds more people is quite good.
I hate Batman Love Letter. I'm really sorry.
But it's Love Letter.
But Batman's the weakest card. He's the guard. So
that's true.
It's like Batman is drunk. He's like, I finally got you, the Joker. It's like, no, Batman. No, I'm Robin. We've been over this. Come on.
That's Commissioner Gordon.
Let's get you back to the cave. Alfred will make you some coffee. He'll sober you up. Batman,
the
please.
detective's only function is to just try and guess something.
Yeah.
In my headcanon, I really want Batman Love Letter to be about the villains writing Batman love letters because they actually really like him secretly. And they want to marry him. So yeah, read my bad fiction, I suppose.
Available soon.
All right, moving on to, let's go to Alex Meehan. Alex Meehan, what have you been playing this week?
It's me. I've been playing a lot of the excellent digital board games that have been going on sale recently, such as Splendor. I also played Splendor with my flatmate, the physical version, but Splendor is currently on Steam as well. For the first time, I've never actually played Splendor before. Strike me down, I guess, for being a scrub. It's really good. It's very straightforward and is actually quite satisfying to see your sort of gem piles grow. And I won without realizing it. Like, I got 3 turns away basically from winning, meaning like I'd won like 3 turns ago and we had no idea. So then
you just carried on playing.
my flatmate was like, you won, right? And I was like, oh. So apparently I had won the game and I didn't realize it because we got like 3 rounds ahead and my friend was like, wait, how long have you had that many gems? I was like, oh, I don't know, like I got them a while ago. And she was like, you've got all these nobles and now you've won. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh.
But it was really fun.
There's a weird thing about board games. Like there's a few different ways in which like victory can sort of like come out through play. Because like sometimes you are just like, you're waiting for your turn, and then you go like, is it my turn? Okay, I've won. Here's what's happened. And then sometimes you're just like, oh, I've won.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really like sell how like invested you've been.
I think it's because the turns are so quick in Splendor, especially when you're playing with just 2 people. Like in the game, you can either take gems or buy things or like reserve gem cards, and you can get like permanent gem cards, which basically means you can always pay that amount of gems, and then you have like temporary gems that you can exchange in order to get cards, and then the amount of gems you have basically wins you influence amongst the noble community, and then you win by having a certain amount of influence. So I'd gotten enough influence to get those nobles. I just hadn't really noticed it. I think because I was so invested on like, what card am I going to get next? What am I going to work towards?
Yeah, Splendor for me is like the perfect example of a game I like, but because of the quality of the assets, I actually love it. Like, because the physical edition has those lovely heavy clay poker chips.
Yeah.
There's just something wonderful about like picking them up and stacking them and moving them around and stuff like that. It's one of those games that I wouldn't love it nearly as much if it weren't for the fact that it was just so nice to handle.
Yeah.
So I can totally see why you got obsessed with just picking up the nice things rather than actually converting them into a win. That's a mistake I would make, I think.
Look at all these nice things I can't have in real life. And then last night, Mr. Jarvis and I, what did we play?
We played Scythe, which actually kind of ties into that, hey, you don't know, like the kind of, oh, I've won or I've lost, because
Hugely.
In Scythe, you get the stars for doing things, and you think, oh, I've got 6 stars, I've won. But actually, you can then not win because someone else has more hexes or has more resources. So it's like this kind of weird, like, oh my god, I'm so close to winning. I've got 5 stars. Oh, I've got the 6th star, and then it's like, oh, but this person with 3 stars actually possesses half the map and has just kind of wiped the floor with me.
Yeah, that's just it. Some people use that as a real criticism of Scythe because it does turn into maths at the end of the game, and I totally get that. And a lot of the game does feel like the race for the 6th star, but really all you're doing is buying yourself an opportunity to lose on points. Like, I always biff it based on spreading out my meeples and having more territory. But I don't know. I'm really, really fond of Scythe. Like, I absolutely love it. So I'm excited that you played. Like, do you like it overall?
So I played it for the first time last night with Mr. Jarvis. Obviously using the digital version on Steam, and I think there's a lot of potential for me to enjoy it. I did have fun. I think it's because it was the first time playing, and I think there is an element of disconnect when you're playing the digital version of a board game, especially one like Scythe, where you kind of have to pay attention to what your opponents are doing and where they are. I think it was harder for me to keep an eye on that stuff. And basically don't play like I did, and just focus on kicking people out of your territory and getting really annoyed because you use too much power to do combat and you didn't realize they had that much power, and then you're like, no, I've got nothing left and my people hate me.
There's definitely like a difficulty to understanding other people's turns in digital editions, I think, because especially strategy games, you need to be paying attention to other people's turns, and sometimes you can just sort of like get halfway through a game and you're like, when the hell did this arrive? Like, I was not expecting 400 mechs to turn up because I just hadn't seen you build them at any point.
And poor Matt Jarvis, you weren't having a fantastic time for a little bit, were you?
Well, I felt like I was doing all right. It'd been a long time since I played it, so I was trying to get back up to speed. And I think, like you, Johnny, I was kind of like in the mindset of like, oh right, it's a strategy game. I spread my people out, like I try and take over the map, forgetting that when you produce, it's better to have a load of meeples stacked in one place because you'll then get 6 bits of wood instead of 1. So I kind of had to reprogram myself back into it. And I don't know if it was the game or if I was just missing something, but at one point I couldn't move my mech into a space with an enemy mech, and I couldn't work out why. I don't know if it was the digital version being funky. I did go through the rules and I couldn't see anything that I had the river walk thing so I could cross the river, that kind of, and it wouldn't let me move into that hex.
That's weird.
And so I spent like 4 turns unable to do it, and then suddenly I could do it. So it was kind of odd.
That sounds like a bug, yeah.
Yeah, but it was fun. I hadn't played Scythe in a while since I reviewed it several years back when it came out. And I remember really enjoying it at the time, and I still like it. And I like the way it's kind of, you can do pretty much anything, and it kind of gets you towards winning. It's like, oh, you can go onto the exploration squares and fight a bear or eat a bear or pick one of those options, or steal a sausage, as happened yesterday.
Steal a sausage.
Yeah. Or you can like produce a load of stuff, or you can build buildings, and everything kind of feels like it's just getting you towards a star or some points or something. But at the same time, that can be a little bit, like I say, the stars are kind of like almost a false kind of load of objectives because you suddenly realize that you've got 5 stars, but you've spent all your power and your popularities in the bin.
Well, that's the thing. Popularity is the one thing that makes all the difference, because that determines what scoring bracket you're in. So you could control the whole map. You could have laid down 6 stars. You could have done, all your upgrades and everything. But if people don't like you, then you're not going to win, which is, an unfortunate allegory for our times.
Look, Johnny, popularity isn't everything. If you can flex enough at the other opponents.
Yeah, it sounds like it really did well for you, Meehan.
Are you going for the Arnold Schwarzenegger for the governor of California route to victory? Is that just lift heavy things and look strong, and then people will vote you into office?
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, the wrestler Kane is also a mayor of an American town, there's a track record for this.
Yeah.
Mr. Michael Wheel and Wheels as you dubbed yourself. What have you been playing?
I've been struggling to play much recently, to be honest, because I've had a few things going on. But I've I was talking about this recently with you guys about how I've just been revisiting a lot of like classics that like things that I haven't played in quite a long time. Something like Suro, which is really, really fun. It's essentially like Tron, the board game, that you're playing as dragons flying around. And I think that's like one of the sort of like earliest things that I played. It's the perfect thing to get out at a pub. I realized before we weren't allowed to go to the pubs. Anyone remember pubs? They were fun. Yeah, like it's the perfect thing to like, you can pay so little attention and then just like have your conversations and your drinks and you're like, oh, is it my turn? Okay, do that. And then just come back to it. So, but it's still got that nice feeling of just sort of like sitting around a game and just sort of enjoying each other's company. But yeah, it's just because now that we've had a big surge of people jumping onto Tabletop Simulator, I've been teaching a lot of people new games. So playing things like Good Cop, Bad Cop, which is one of the games I recommended for Hidden Roll fans and stuff like that. It's been nice to jump back to the classics and get new people into the old stuff.
Nice. Have you found Tabletop Sim? I think we've all kind of used a bit of Tabletop Sim lately for obvious
Sims,
reasons.
I still haven't used it, but that's partly because I'm just playing so many tabletop role-playing games over Hangouts at the minute. Like a lot, at least 3 a week. It's bananas.
So I've been playing Tabletop Sims since it came out, because when I went to university, a lot of my friends who I played board games with were also in different unis. And there wasn't a lot of people that I knew in the uni itself that played. So I always ended up playing digital versions. And when that came out, we were like, oh, finally, now we have something to use. My favorite thing about the Steam Workshop application is that you can basically play anything. It's a really good way of almost like demoing stuff. If you can't get to like a board game cafe and you're thinking about playing something or buying it, you can give it a go online, and then you've got the sort of actual experience of playing it before you pick it up. But mainly it's just like you can just be really sort of it goes a long way to making you feel like you're all together in a space. Just the fact that it is like a little physics engine, like you can pick things up and flip them around and all kinds of stuff. Whilst that is incredibly abusable by some of your sillier friends, like people will like take your playing pawn and make it 400 times the size and then chuck it around the table and stuff.
Who would do such a thing, Will?
No, who would do that? But also, like, there's all these little gimmicks. So you can have like people can put a tablet down and you can collectively watch like YouTube videos together whilst you're playing and stuff. So like I was teaching like Matt and Zoe and somebody else, Dean actually, how to play Cyclades, which is my favorite game of all time. And I just got a little tablet out, like it's basically like a false iPad, and shoved the Age of Mythology soundtrack on. Oh, and it's just it's just huge. It's amazing. And like there's so many little gimmicks like that just add that element of like sharing a space together. And I think you lose some of that in the sort of standalone video game versions of board games. Like I didn't actually get to play Cypher with you guys last night, but I can imagine that it wouldn't have felt quite the same as like you wouldn't have felt like you were sharing that space together. It probably would have just felt like you were playing a strategy game online kind of thing.
Yeah. Why would you use a YouTube function, Wills, when all that amazing royalty-free music is available?
Yeah, that's another thing, to be fair. Like they have a big collection of like, just stock music tracks that you get like a little iPod and you can flick through them.
Oh, delicious.
Yeah, it's just like they have put a lot of effort into just like feature heavy. Like they wanted it to just be, they haven't spent their time like filling it with brand deals and all this kind of stuff. It's very much, look, this is about as functional as it gets. Like you've got all kinds of stuff here to try and make your life easier. It's really nice for people who are prototyping their own board games as well. I know that later games use it a lot because it means that you can upload your own custom art, which means you can have your own boards, your own cards. You can like pre-program stuff. So when sometimes you'll download mods for a certain game that you want to play. So we played Mysterium, and it was all just sort of like press this button and we will do all the setup for you. And it's like, oh, excellent! Like there's a lot of flexibility, and if you're quite smart with stuff like that, you can even like add custom Lua scripts and all these kinds of things. Like it reminds me of like Gary's mod. I know this is a bit of a video game reference, but like just having a completely open platform to people to go nuts with also encourages people to be really creative with how they sort of portray these games online. I think that's why.
But does Mysterium in Tabletop Simulator have an absolutely vile-looking lobby that is really counterintuitive? Because, oh boy, the actual version that's been released on Steam has... Mysterium, I've played a few games of it now over Steam, and it's pretty generous in that if one person buys all of the expansions, then they appear for everyone. Rather than all people having to buy card packs or whatever. So you can play with a massive array of different cards. And the game itself, once you're in there, is really elegant and it works really well and it's really thematic. The lobby is hilarious. It's just awful. And it's like there's just an open chat, which for some reason is just full of Italian speakers. Like, I think... I don't know.
Do you think they saw your surname and they put you in the wrong lobby? Is that...
Yeah, that's probably it. It's either that or Mysterium is secretly incredibly popular in Italy.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, to be fair, Dixit, which is based on, is French, right? I think it's quite a European concept. The sort of like abstract art cards kind of thing. Like,
but unlike Dixit, Mysterium is fun.
Yes, that's true.
And as
Dixit definitely feels like old people version of Mysterium.
And as we all know, Italy is the land of spooks. So, of course,
yeah.
I want to say Mysterium was based on like I think it was Hungarian game that I can't remember the name of. But yeah, there's definitely like Europe tends to be where a lot of that stuff comes out.
They love a guessy picture. They really do.
I think like the continent are a bit more creative than the really boring Englishmen who make games, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely got like I love Mysterium, and I think it leans into the fact that when you've got the sort of the kookiness of tabletop sim, you get all that sort of fun thing of like a card just floating towards you as somebody on a mic over Steam is like, ooh. You can do a lot of really fun things with it. But yeah, no, I think tabletop sim is really good. The only sort of like, I guess the sort of controversial thing about tabletop sim is because you can upload whatever you want, it means that people are just playing games for free without really contributing. But they do have like a DLC section where you can buy like official versions, like official digital versions of some people's games. So I think it's Sia, which I think you were going to talk about. I think that might actually have an official version on Tabletop Sim as well.
Yeah, Zia's on there, and I think Wingspan and things like that. And like you say, like later games who do Root and Oath and so on, there are some publishers that put up their own games for free as playtest versions. But yeah, there's a weird like grey, morally and legally grey area. I think some people that make mods are like, oh, I think there's a Star Wars Rebellion one where it's like, we haven't included this set of cards, so you need to still own the actual board game. But like you said, it's not necessarily the same as playing in person. So I think a lot of times they're kind of okay with it because it kind of encourages people to then go out and get the actual thing. But
it reminds me of that whole sort of debate that was had around video game piracy, where it was like, yes, like you're not losing sales, you are having people who wouldn't necessarily have bothered with your game play it, and then a percentage of those people will actually go and purchase it. So it's like, I think especially with tabletop, because it's still quite niche, I do think they're probably benefiting from this. Like it's a platform for people to be able to grab something random as a mod, try it out and think, oh, this is really good, actually I'm going to buy it for myself so I can play it in person. But that's my 2 cents. Obviously, I'm not heavily invested in the publication of physical products, so like I'm probably just speaking out my own bum. But there you go. Matt Jarvis.
So speaking of Zia Legends of a Drift System, which is a heavily overwrought title for a very kind of dumb game, but dumb in a good way. So Zia, it came out a few years ago, but it's quite hard to find. But I managed to pick up a copy online before all this happened. And it's basically a space sandbox. So you whiz around in a ship that you start off with. And you can be, it's similar to Merchants and Marauders, if anyone's played that, apart from being, you're not pirates, you're space pirates. So you can fly around, you can take missions, you can kind of shoot at other people's ships. There are some NPCs that kind of join in as well. You visit different planets and trade things and go after bounties. But it's kind of like gloriously silly. So you kind of whiz around, you do whatever you want. But then it just has like these little mechanics that are just like little like gameplay things where you can choose to kind of just push it that little bit further. So one of the best ones is the I'm trying to remember that, but there's like basically a hyperdrive, so you can move a set number of spaces, but then you can use your hyperdrive and roll a die to see if you go any further, and you could just straight up roll a 1 and not move very far at all, or you could roll, something much higher. So it's completely bound to luck. And as you explore, you place down kind of hex tiles to generate the universe, and you can either spend an action to kind of scout ahead and look at the tile before you move onto it, or you can just move onto it and reveal the next tile, which I did on my very first turn of Zia, and it happened to be the sun. So I flew straight into the sun and exploded. And that was my first turn of Zia. And I think if that sounds massively frustrating to you, Zia is not the game that you should play, but I loved it. And kind of it immediately hooked me in of like, oh, right, yeah, like I deserve that because I was just like steaming full ahead. Yeah. But it lets you do that. But then you'll have these silly little stories of like, oh, I crashed into an asteroid, or there's a lot of things where it's like you can try and fly through an asteroid field or mine an asteroid field, and you roll a die, and on whatever to whatever, you mine some stuff, get some good stuff, and on like a 10 or something, you just explode.
I love stuff like that. Like among my friends, when we play Twilight Imperium, there's a running gag where it's like, well, okay, who's going to sit where? Well, Johnny's got to be near the grav rift because the gravity, the gravity well, it only gives you +1 movement, and it could destroy your ship. But I can't leave it alone. It's fantastic. Like anyone who doesn't use that thing at every opportunity is a coward. There, I said it. It's the best thing about Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, it's like games like Cosmic Encounter, where it's just like they're kind of willingly unbalanced. Like there's a whole debate in the tabletop world of like, oh, games should be finely balanced, and I think that works for some games. Like if it's massively strategic and people are getting into it and it's played at a really high level. But I think for me, the best games are kind of the ones that are willing to just be a little bit loose around the edges, like Betrayal at House on the Hill. Things can be massively unbalanced in that game because the traitor can be armed with 15 guns and a knife and a dog companion, and happen to start off in the room that they need to be in. But that's kind of the fun of it, is they leave you with stories to tell rather than just going like, oh, I executed this strategy to perfection.
Yes, exactly. We revealed the traitor, and then, of course, we went into the deployment phase, but eventually our left flank just didn't hold. That's not in any way Betrayal at House on the Hill.
I think there's definitely a space for just sort of like knowing the kind of experience that you're trying to generate when you're making these things. Like there's a game called Comet, which is in the same sort of like pseudo kind of series as Cyclades, and they added this expansion where essentially it's like battles in ancient Egypt, and there's mythological creatures and all this kind of stuff. But they add an expansion where someone plays as like this enormous purple godlike figure who's against everybody else. And it's basically like you're Thanos. You're just like you're annihilating people left, right, and center. And it's just dumb as hell, but that's the appeal of it. It's like we took a game that, because I'm not sure if you've played Comet, but it's like it's one of those games where it's like everything is incredibly balanced. Like you don't roll dice to fight; you have a deck of cards that everybody shares. You have like all of the things that are available to you are available to everyone from the start, and the first person who gets them is the first person who gets them, and all this kind of thing. So like usually in that game, if you make a mistake, then it's your mistake. Like there's not a whole lot of luck apart from just trying to read your opponents. Whereas with this, they were like, nah, screw that. This guy's got a massive laser beam and he's going to burn your face off just because he can.
Is it weird that when you said big purple entity, my brain immediately went to Grimace from McDonald's, not Thanos?
See, my mind goes to one-eyed, one-eared, giant purple people eater.
What the hell?
No one knows that?
Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, that's a childhood spent listening to an album of novelty number ones for you. Ernie, Fastest Milkman in the West? Is that
absolutely.
Any better?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Right, there we go. There's your level. Anyway, let's move on to news, shall we? Before we descend into...
We've done the opposite of news, which is things that are so obscure that nobody has ever heard of them.
Olds, I think they call them.
This is news about 70s number ones. Okay, moving on to news. It's a bit of a quiet time. Well, it's both quiet and not quiet. I think there's not a lot of Kickstarters happening because of people obviously being on lockdown and people not wanting to necessarily spend a lot of money. But there are kind of a couple of big Kickstarters coming out. The biggest of which is Frosthaven, which, as we record this, went up a couple of days ago and has already raised an obscene amount of money. I think it's over $5 million already.
Yeah, that's right.
So for folks who don't know what Frosthaven is, it's the sequel of a kind to Gloomhaven, the big old kind of fantasy adventure game, kind of RPG in a box from a couple of years ago. So it's a standalone game. It's set in a new place. It's kind of built off the gameplay of Gloomhaven in that you use cards to fight things, but you can mix them together. You can kind of have characters crossover. But Johnny and Wills, you have played Frosthaven.
Oh boy, have we! Yes. In the before time, we attended PAX East, and we got an hour-long demo with Frosthaven. So it was the two of us, Lolies, who's the third member of the video team, who was a big Gloomhaven fan, which was good because Wills and I hadn't played Gloomhaven before, so she was able to key us into what was different and what was similar. And we played with another man who just sort of was there in our appointment. Or rather, we were there in his appointment. We're all friends. We were playing a game together. But it was really good fun. I left that room very excited for Frosthaven and very angry with my friends who own Gloomhaven that they're not that jazzed about it, and so we've never played it together, because it's really good fun. For anyone who has played Gloomhaven before, rather, Frosthaven is very, very similar. Like, there are things that have changed. There are some new characters, some new enemies. Obviously, there are some new, it's all new scenarios and story content. But the base game is practically unchanged. I think the boldest thing they've done in terms of sort of changing the format is they've tweaked enemy AI. But it was lovely. Like, Wheels, I think you remember the characters better than I do that we were all playing, because they were really good fun. Mine was quite straightforward, really.
We got offered, basically, Frosthaven is just more of the same, but with new content, right? So it's like all of the characters are different. There's new monsters, there's a new story, there's new sort of there's a few new mechanics that we were teased, but we didn't really see because we essentially just played like a little battle quest thing where we were in a big snowstorm, so we had to find a cave, but the cave was full of grizzlies. So I was playing as a necromancer skeleton spawner, because of course I was. And he was quite cool. He was basically, he was like a summoner, right? So he would just sort of plonk down little things that would just attack whatever the nearest target was. But then sort of the central gimmick of both Gloomhaven and Frosthaven is that you have a hand of cards, rather, which you start with all of them and then they dwindle down. And you can play a top half of a card and a bottom half of a card on two separate cards. So you might have a very standard attack on one side, which after you play it will go eventually back into your hand, or you can flip to the other side of the card, which will have a mega powerful thing, but it will be gone for the rest of the quest. So a lot of that character was you can spawn your bog standard skeletons, but here's a big meat abomination that you can pull out of your bag, and he'll as soon as he's dead, he's gone. We also had killers. Yeah, exactly. Flesh Atronach. But we also played, as you said, with someone we didn't know who was also just trying out. And he played as one of the wackier ones, which was this sort of shapeshifter character, which had two states. So one of the cards in that character's hand would ask you to sort of flip a token, which would then push you onto another version of yourself, which had a completely different hand of cards. So they were two different play styles, but they were played by the same person. So knowing when to flip one way or the other was really important for that. You then played as a sort of spear warden or something?
Yes. So from the Kickstarter art, there's sort of a lady with a spear, sort of spearing a big frosty, nasty monster thing.
Big haven.
Big frosty haven. That was my character, which was I was quite mobile and quite attacky, but I had a bunch of more powerful moves, but on them they had little hex maps, whereby I had to be in a certain location, an enemy had to be in a certain location, or more than one, and one of my allies had to be there. So in the planning phase where we were picking our cards, because of course you're not allowed to show anyone else your cards in Gloomhaven or in Frosthaven, and the initiative order is determined by the lowest number on the cards you play. So there was quite a lot of me being like, how early is everyone going? And do you reckon you might maybe be standing there by the end of your turn? So I actually found myself playing quite a hard and fast, like rush style, where it was like I was just playing the lowest initiatives I could as often as I could, because I knew that like the fleeting chances for me to really be an effective team member, they would only really work if I could get in early doors. So kind of like in like, well, I mean, as I understand it, this is a thing that happens in Gloomhaven. There are points where everyone else is gone. You're like, oh, my guy's kind of, I've got to do something else now. I guess my plans changed, which, you know, was an interesting wrinkle. And I think there was one turn where I was outside the cave and I knew I couldn't get to anything. So I just went further away from the action and started looting, mostly to annoy lowlies. But yeah, no, it's bloody good, I think. Obviously, a bit of a bleak story, because the idea is you go to check on Frosthaven and see how it is, and it's been razed to the ground.
Oh, good.
It's not a good time to own real estate in Frosthaven. But yeah, so kind of with all of that in mind, and obviously with the massive popularity of Gloomhaven, not really a surprise it's made quite so much money on the old Kickstarter.
I think
that's my cat.
Yeah, there you go. This is the cat special. The first episode is the cat special.
Sorry about this.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say that the one sort of thing that they did tease to us is like the new thing about this game is that Frosthaven in its destroyed state needs to be rebuilt. So that'll be one of the sort of like core things you'll be wrestling with. So instead of just picking up like loot and then purchasing items and stuff in between quests, you'll also pick up like resources that you can then try and build sort of like permanent bonuses out of by reconstructing this town and bringing it back to the sort of state it used to be in. So that sounds like a sort of fun kind of like narrative hook that you'll have in between all the missions as well.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I do wonder how many people, because Gloomhaven is a big old game. You know, it's probably, you could probably play it for over 100 hours. I think there's almost 100 different scenarios. Then there's an expansion for it and things like that. So how many people picking up Frosthaven have finished Gloomhaven? How many people are kind of feel like they missed the boat in the first place and are kind of see this as their chance now? But
from what I can tell, I don't think it was that important that you even played the first one, to be honest. It seemed like it was like far removed enough that whilst there probably will be sort of like elements of, like someone watching a sequel to a film where you don't really need to see the original, they'll get bits out of it that the people who are new to it won't get, but the people who are completely new to it will still have just as an enjoyable experience. My God.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, sorry, Johnny, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, people are clearly very happy to have backed it, and I wonder how many of those people are the ones that are like, let's get in on it now and make sure we've got it, so when we finish Gloomhaven we can start, and like we won't get done in by any scarcity or whatever. Yeah,
that's a fair point. I think the original was kind of hard to find, so maybe it's people just teeing it up for 200 hours time after they finish Gloomhaven, because it doesn't sound like it's not a completely different game. So if you still own the original, how much is this worth dropping like another 80 odd quid on? But also it's not going to be out for a while, I suppose, because it's a Kickstarter. I don't actually know if it's got a rough release date yet, or backer.
It's March. It's roughly March 2021.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you could probably squeeze in Gloomhaven before then.
Challenge accepted.
But
5 years later.
The other big Kickstarter, which launched, is launching even, so it's coming on the 14th of April, is Ankh, or Gods of Egypt, which is the third game in the trilogy. It's kind of like it's not an official trilogy, but it's kind of been dubbed the Mythic Trilogy from Eric Lang, who did Blood Rage and Rising Sun, which are the other two games. Has anyone played Blood Rage or Rising Sun or both?
No, there's a copy of Blood Rage.
I know a lot about Blood Rage. I still haven't actually been able to sit down with it. But I know that it's like, to be honest, it has that similar feel to something like Scythe, where it's like you think it's going to be big punch-ups and massive robots and stuff, but actually it's quite a sort of varied path to victory. Because I think you draft your actions at the start of each turn, right? So you're kind of you're picking like a sort of game plan for your turn based on the cards that you're selecting and then going after stuff. But there's quite a few different ways in which you can win.
Yeah, so there's slightly different games. Like Rising Sun is you kind of, it's been a little while since I played it, but you kind of invest coins into different actions during fights. There's some, so they're kind of all based on their gods. They come with a lot of miniatures. So Blood Rage was kind of very Norse, like Viking gods. Rising Sun was set in kind of ancient Japan and had a lot of kind of Japanese deities and yokai and so on. But there's some stuff that's a little like less, like Eric Lang clearly loves his mythology, but in Rising Sun, for instance, you can commit seppuku, which I
remember why I haven't played Rising Sun.
Yeah.
Do you now validate this for me? Because I feel like I heard it in the rumor mill and don't know if it was actually true or not. So I'm hoping that somebody else knows what I'm talking about. But as far as I'm aware, there was like a Kickstarter bonus god character, which was dredged up from a Wikipedia article that somebody wrote as a joke about their mate.
Yep, this is true. It's the New Zealand farmer whose friends thought it'd be funny to make him a Japanese deity on the Wikipedia page. I can't remember the name of him. And then the implication is that whoever come on was kind of putting together I think it was a Kickstarter stretch goal or exclusive or something like that. It kind of found its way in and then got pulled up. I think there were like a load of New Zealand TV reports about this random farmer who'd just been pranked. So it was before, obviously, the game was announced. They hadn't done it deliberately for the game. But yeah, the implication was that basically the research into these deities was quite light.
And considering some of the sort of like cultural inappropriateness of it, I think that's probably a fair comment.
Yeah, but the game itself I enjoyed. It's just, I mean, all games in general don't have a fantastic track record with different themes like this, colonization and so on, which is a shame given that, they often look great and the actual gameplay is really great fun. But yeah, it's something just worth being wary of, I suppose.
I think Lang, he's got good intentions. Like, he clearly cares about these myths in terms of getting people excited about them, because there's a video released, I think it was today, where it was basically like a rough gameplay overview of Ankh. And there is also an interview video. You can watch both of these on a news piece on our website, Dicebreaker.com, and learn more about Ankh there. But he seems to come across as someone who is clearly passionate about myths and wants to get other people passionate about them. But I think there is an element of maybe wording and also depiction that isn't really 100% accurate or fair or okay.
I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say.
Yeah. I was just especially kind of unsure about Ankh in terms of the fact because it is Egyptian. I would be sat here thinking a little bit like, I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm hoping that it leans really into the fantasy elements of Egyptian myth. It sounds like the way that Lang phrased the world of Ankh makes it sound like it's an alternative version of the real world, I guess, in terms of like these gods are fighting to stay relevant in a world that's kind of forgetting them. That's kind of the whole premise of Ankh. But I think the passion kind of comes out in particularly how the different gods seem to play individually. So as far as we know, the different gods are like Ra and Osiris and Amun, and oh my goodness, now I can't remember the name of the god of death.
Anubis.
Anubis. Anubis has a special ability, for example, when opponents' units die, Anubis can basically put them in a separate dimension to prevent opponents from basically hating them from their pool again, and they have to exchange one of their followers with Anubis in order to get that unit back. And I think that potentially is a kind of an interesting way of sort of linking the god with the mythology.
I quite like when the sort of asymmetry of factions also plays into sort of like the mechanical sort of like almost like day-to-day stuff of the game itself. Like I remember hearing a lot about the Dune board game, and the fact that like the roles that you're playing in that game aren't just like, okay, here's your special power. It's like, no, here's the thing that you're actually in control of. So when people want to interact with this thing, they have to go through you. And I think that puts you in a really interesting position, because instead of having all of your power just be based on, all right, where are your dudes set on the map, on how much money do you have? It's actually like, look, if you want my help on this thing, then you're actually going to have to start talking to me about some of the stuff that you owe me, kind of thing. And I like games that sort of sit you in a very unique position in that sort of like web of power that it has over it.
So I don't think there are different win conditions in Ankh, from what I tell. I think it's very much a victory point system called devotion in this case. However, the different gods do have quite differing abilities, and I think Lang has said that he's kind of stripped things back to give players less abilities, but ones that are basically more impactful, which I personally like the sound of over, perhaps the other games in the series that have come out. And also, one of the things that has really piqued my attention is apparently in games, I think of more than 2 players, 2 of the players can fuse into one god and basically have to then work together as a single unit. For those listening on the podcast side, audio.
Oh yeah, soz.
You video people forgetting about audio listeners.
Will's just did a classic fusion move.
It's the fusion dance from Dragon Ball Z. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
There he is.
Here he comes.
Kamikolo.
That really piqued my interest. Yeah, like that's a really unusual. It's not like I imagine it's appeared in other games, but I've certainly sort of never heard of it acting quite in the same way.
Yeah, it will be good if it's exciting, because obviously in Root you can play a card and be like, I'm going to buddy up with this person now, and if they win, I win. But oftentimes when someone does that, everyone goes, okay, like it's not exciting.
Yeah, I think in this case, because the 2 players are permanently fused together, it's not like a temporary thing. It's not like, oh, let's be buddies for a bit and then you can screw them over. I think their fates are kind of intertwined permanently, and then their success or failure is based on whichever other god is kind of like, no, whichever of the gods in the pairing has the lowest devotion. So they have to work together in order to make sure that they don't drag each other down. And I think you can separate the board into different regions as well, because as an area control game, you can essentially create more and more regions for people to fight for control over. So yeah, I'm just interested.
I'm interested to check it out, and hopefully they've just, again, I think those games always take kind of like the Hollywood approach to the mythological aspects, which is fine in some regards. I don't think they're setting out to be offensive. It's just kind of, these things just slip through here and there, but hopefully they've kind of picked it up a little bit for this one, just so that you can enjoy it a little bit more without having to worry about those aspects. But I guess time will tell.
Playing the gods themselves, I think it's definitely leaning more into the fantasy elements of the theme, rather than like with Rising Sun, where you're playing as
like clans
in a society.
Yeah. I think in terms of other news, there's the other big one that was just announced is the Tales from the Loop board game, which is based on the role-playing game. I don't know if anyone here has played Tales from the Loop.
My mate is super into the art style, so he always like tags me in any post where they're like, they're doing this thing with Tales from the Loop, and I'm like, cool, man.
Yeah,
I've never really interacted with it myself.
Simon Stalenhag, I think, is the Swedish artist name.
It's got a very similar vibe to Scythe, where it's like the art inspired a lot of things, kind of.
Yeah, so it's like, I think the role-playing game was based on the art book, and then there's now an Amazon series which is based on the art book, but then the board game is based on the role-playing game based on the art book. And then there's a video game called Generation Zero, which is not based on any of it, but has like a very similar, but it's not related in any way, as far as I believe. But they clearly looked at it and went, that looks nice, we'll do that.
Tales from the book, Tales from the Loop.
Yeah. But the RPG and the kind of world is kind of a bit Stranger Things-ish. So it's kind of like 80s. I think the other books then go into the 90s, but it's kind of like kids solving mysteries about mysterious happenings.
There's definitely been like a surge of that kind of stuff, especially post Stranger Things, and I wonder if we're kind of coming to the end of that sort of public care about it. So I wonder if they'll be slightly unfortunately timed to this. Although the art is fantastic, I will say, but I'm not sure how well the RPG itself stands up, to be fair.
Yeah, I think people really like the RPG. I think it won like a few awards, and maybe off the back of this TV show, which has some kind of big names in it, maybe it'll fly off the back of that. But yeah, the board game, it sounds very similar to the RPG, so it's we actually, if you head over to dicebreaker.com, we have some first kind of gameplay details and some pictures and stuff from chatting with the folks behind it at Free League Publishing. But it's essentially a group of teenagers explores the world, fights weird things that happen because of this. It's sort of similar to the Large Hadron Collider, I think. It's a like particle collider under the ground, but in this case it spawns dinosaurs and weird robots.
Yeah,
of course it does.
Yeah, like Switzerland is full of because of the Large Hadron Collider.
A mystery.
Yeah,
Then
so it's
rewrite a little bit of history. I want a DuckTales RPG.
God.
there are, as far as I know, there are no ducks in Tales from the Loop, the RPG or the board game.
0 out of 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not loads of detail yet. But it sounds kind of like it's going to follow that rough thing of you move around, you discover rumors, you fight things, you try and solve a mystery, be back home in time for tea, etc. It looks pretty nice. Like again, the visuals are kind of the draw here. I think there's some miniatures and stuff like that. But that will be coming to. I will read this thing. April 7th is when that comes to Kickstarter. So that's the other kind of big one launching at the moment. And I think other than that, it's kind of, there's a selection of stuff obviously being delayed out of the back of the ongoing pandemic. So Fantasy Flight, which is kind of the big company behind Arkham Horror and like the Lord of the Rings card game and Android Netrunner, but not anymore because it's dead. And a few other games like that. That said, it's delayed all of its releases. Games Workshop has shut down all of its kind of businesses for the time being.
Its paint manufacturers are making sanitizer at the minute.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
And then there's obviously events that have been cancelled kind of or delayed across the board. So like the UK Games Expo has been delayed into August. The company, the studio behind Pandemic, which I believe is selling extremely well out of the back of this pandemic, they've kind of said, oh, hey, we're not going to announce anything because now's really not the time.
I wouldn't be surprised if Pandemic Legacy Season 3 would just be delayed until next year.
Yeah. So they've
get flack for because the rumor mill has been circulating about it being. Has it been fully announced, or are we still unsure about? We don't know. Mill is circling.
let's say those the details of it are not announced publicly.
Yeah.
Yes. So
therefore, Matthew Jarvis knows nothing about it.
Yes.
People are talking about it coming, and Matt Leacock has confirmed its existence in an interview I did with him last year, which you can read on Dicebreaker.com. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't come out for a while. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think they've confirmed that it's coming. I think they originally said this year, but didn't give any further details. But from what I understand, the announcement will basically be delayed. So as far as the release goes, I think like everything else is kind of up in the air for the time being.
Yeah.
But out the back of this, the positive in massive air quotes. But there have been a number of publishers and designers and so on that have basically put out quite a few of their games for free as print and plays or as digital versions or online versions. So I'll just rattle through these because times are ticking. But there's Xenoshift, which is the game from the people that made Zombicide. That's like a sci-fi co-op game that came out a few years ago and was actually out of print. That's been put out as a complete print and play, which I think it's a lot because there's a lot of cards in there. There's a whole board. But you can just get the whole thing for free. Corinth, which is a little roll and write game, which I really like. It's not necessarily distinctive, but it's pretty solid. That's from Days of Wonder, which made Ticket to Ride. That can be downloaded for free. We've already mentioned Love Letter, which is available for free. Jamie Stegmaier, who made Scythe and Tapestry and Viticulture, he put out a game that was originally called 9 Worlds and is now called Rolling Realms. That's another roll and write, which is quite good. It's solid, but he put it out for free, and he's put up videos where he plays it, and you can play along with him, which is quite sweet.
That I love. I love that you can play it against Jamie himself if you follow the video along. I will say that, like, I know these are called print and plays, but like especially with things like Corinth, like you can grab a tablet and just sort of like draw over the image and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily have to have a printer to be able to play, but having things like dice and stuff are kind of handy. Or
you can contact me and I will acquire a printer and send you printed copies.
Here's Alex Meehan's personal address.
Send a stamp to
Please grab your pens now.
No, it will be like a temporary address.
Please head on over to dicebreaker.com/where does Meehan live?
If you're familiar with the game Coup, I've also been playing a variant called Mind Coup recently. It started as a joke, and now my friends and I can actually quite genuinely play a game of Coup together without cards. You just think what cards you have at the start of the game, and then you play Coup.
But wait, surely you can lie.
You can't lie. I mean, you can lie in Coup.
Oh, you can't lie?
You have to be honest with yourself about what cards you have. It's a trust exercise.
You're like liar. You're like Jim Carrey in that film.
Yeah, shout out to Mind Coup. It's a stunner.
How does the ambassador work? How does the ambassador work?
If no one challenges you, then you just think up 2 cards. It's the way I play it is the first 2 cards that come into my head.
This is frustrating me, just thinking about it.
Well, it's all right. We'll play a few over lunch. You'll get it.
No, I won't.
You could probably play The Mind, to be fair.
Well, that's a drama game. Like,
that's just count to 20, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why one of my friends who is an actor refuses to play The Mind. He's like, it's just a drama game. We did this in drama school. I'm not doing it.
The Crew is a better version of The Mind.
Oh, my God. I keep looking forlornly at my copy of The Crew. A game about touching the same deck of cards repeatedly with other people. Now's not the time, but my goodness, when all this is over, I love
Tabletop Sim. You don't need to be able to see each other. You don't need any physical interaction to play the Crew. So if it's on there,
God, I love The Crew.
Maybe that's your case to do it.
And in terms of releases, there are not many. So in future Dicebreaker podcasts, we'll kind of sum up what's coming out this week, but actually there's not a lot at the moment for obvious reasons. I think it's largely RPGs because RPGs are able to come out in PDF. So there's the Labyrinth RPG, which you 3 have played and I have not.
Yes, there is a playthrough on the YouTube channel, expertly GM'd by our very own Alex Meehan. It's a bloody great game.
Dressed
it's
like
extremely
David
funny
Bowie as well. So
it was actually GM'd by my alter ego, Johnny.
Sorry.
The Goblin King.
Yes.
He listens to this, so
Oh God, sorry, my lord.
Claim for royalties.
Criminal.
The other notable ones that have just come out are the second edition of Harlem Unbound, which is kind of it's a supplement for Call of Cthulhu, which kind of very directly kind of works to like combat the racism in Lovecraft and kind of Cthulhu mythos stuff. It's by a designer called Chris Spivey, who the original edition got a lot of awards and plaudits and whatnot. So sorry, Meehan, what did you say?
Yeah, I was going to say the design is really cool. Am I getting confused? Harlem Unbound, was that going to be the new thing he's working on, or is there something else he's working on?
No, so he's working on a Western which goes along similar lines of kind of telling the stories of people of color and so on who have been kind of often left out of the genre, called Haunted West, which is kind of like a Weird West. So it's a cross between Lovecraftian horror and Wild West stuff. I don't believe there's a release date on that yet. And he has also been working on a sci-fi role-playing game, originally with the publisher of Chaosium, the publisher of Call of Cthulhu, Chaosium, but that's come under his own independent studio, Darker Hue. And again, that does not have a release date.
Didn't he also, or isn't he also working on Dune? The Dune?
Dune, yes. Yeah, Chris Spivey is also writing for the upcoming Dune RPG based on the book, I think, rather than the film, although kind of...
You'd hope.
Yeah.
No, I want Sting to be in my adventure.
Oh, I meant the upcoming film, but the David Lynch one would be very funny.
Okay,
yeah. Great.
Actually, yeah, give us the David Lynch RPG.
Oof.
Everything's a dream. The other RPG out this week, kind of smaller indie stuff, but it's Heart of the City Beneath, which is from Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor, who Grant Howitt will be familiar to some folks through various one-page RPGs such as Honey Heist and Jason Statham's Big Vacation, which I say mainly because it's fun to say.
Yeah, and Reverse Beastmaster, which we play on the YouTube channel.
And Reverse Beastmaster. Which Grant played with Lowly's Johnny and Wheels and Nate Crowley.
Nate Crowley was GMing it. It was chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is extremely funny. Everyone should watch that video. I laughed myself very. I can't. Is what happened with the? There's like a lizard or something. I can't remember. I feel like it's all a fever trip.
Oh, God.
I mean, there are the Cockney iguanas who want some room temperature cocaine.
That's what I'm thinking of. Cockney iguanas.
Yeah. So then, if you're above the age of 18, and you want a terrible, terrible, cursed thing to watch, which is absolutely hilarious, then that's the thing to do.
Although, from what I can see, this new RPG isn't so fun and games. It's the Jarvis.
No, it's a follow-up to Spire, which was an RPG that Christopher Taylor and Grant Howitt put out a couple of years ago. Spire was very much a kind of class division kind of metaphor, I don't know, allegory.
Yeah, I think the high elves were very much like the ruling class and everyone else suffered underneath them.
Yeah.
This is kind of more of, because this was set, I think Spire was set in the titular Spire, which is like a sort of mega city complex, but this is kind of set in like the horrible like pits below it. And I think it's got a kind of like body horror theme to it, which is quite cool.
Yeah, it's basically super dark and grim dungeon delving. There are more details on the website written up by Sarah Elsom of the site, who is kind of our go-to resident for all things spooky and creepy and cursed. So they've written up a fantastic little run through of it. But it seems super interesting. I really like Grant Howitt stuff. So.
There's also the Dishonored RPG, which came out.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Which I'm very excited to play, because I like Dishonored, the video game series.
That was very good. If you're listening, whoever the hell makes Dishonored, put it on Switch.
Arcane Studios.
Yeah, Arcane Studios, who are a big fan of this podcast, which has only just launched. Make sure you put that on Switch for me. Cheers, thanks, bye.
I'm excited about this RPG, though. I want to see how it differs from Blades in the Dark, because obviously that draws very heavily from Dishonored. I mean, there's Dunwall is the city in the first Dishonored, and then there's Duskval in Blades in the Dark, and it's mentioned as one of the primary touchstones at the start of the book.
And then obviously Dishonored 2 has Karnaka. That's the one. The other setting as well. So it's got a really nice bit of world building to inspire DMs and players with. And I'm hoping to do stuff with it.
Johnny's a big fan of Dishonored because they actively murder all whales on site. That's the.
Oh, mate, whales have a terrible time in that game. It brings me joy.
Whale punk.
Anti-whale society.
Oh my god, whale punk. What a genre.
Blubber punk.
Blubber punk.
I mean, I now want to write a blubber punk RPG.
Do it, mate.
Because I'm terrified of whales, but fascinated by them. I'm an AHAV in training. I've still got all my limbs, but give me time.
You've got the look down.
Thanks, mate. Short drafts, long swallows. 'Tis hot as Satan's hoof.
All right, shall we move on to some emails from the audience?
Yeah,
and Twitter questions. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We got a lot, so we will not get through them all today, but we appreciate it. And we will.
My address.
Do not send them to Alex Meehan's address.
Remember, that's dicebreaker.com/where does Meehan live.
But if you do have questions for future episodes of the podcast, send them to contact@dicebreaker.com or tweet them at us. If you email us, please put DB podcast in the subject line, just so we can sort them out. But yeah, thank you to everyone who sent them in. We had some really lovely messages, which we won't be able to read in full, but it's very much appreciated. I hope everyone's staying safe and just finding the time to play games and stay in touch with your loved ones and friends here and there. But shall I read this first email and then we'll maybe see how many we fit in after this?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. So this is from an anonymous emailer. Hello, I saw that you are looking for questions advice on Twitter, and I have a question. I'm a GM, my group are lovely, but the issue is that I have a terrible bladder. As soon as I start focusing on anything, I need to pee very badly, sometimes up to every 30 minutes. I'm not asking for medical advice, although maybe I should. But instead, what would you recommend I provide for my players while I disappear from the table? Thanks, Bladderless in Baldur's Gate, which is an excellent sign-off.
What a start that is. If people are going to do an anonymous email, that is the bar that you need to be hitting.
I'm Bladderless, the wife.
Old man Bladderless over here. This is a really good question, actually, and I think it's definitely something that I think more people will be experiencing than they realize. So this is essentially the kind of problem that you run into when you split the party, because eventually you have to stop focusing on one group of people and start focusing on the other. In this case, you're just stopping to focus on everyone whilst they sort of like wait for you to, do what you need to do. The interesting thing that I like to do whenever I'm in that sort of situation, like whether I do need to just sort of step away for a second, or if I've split the party and I want to sort of switch from one perspective to another, I always try and leave the players on some kind of cliffhanger. So I think the worst thing that you can do is if you're like, okay, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to need to stand up and put us on a pause. Don't leave them after a big encounter and they've sorted all the stuff for now and they're just waiting for the next thing to happen, sat around in a corridor, because I feel like that's where people start to sort of check out. And it can be really hard to push people back into that headspace of like, okay, here's the exciting thing that's happened. But if you're leaving them and, you said you've just described the fact that one of the players is like clinging by their fingertips to the side of a mountain and then they start to feel a rock crack and then you go, and I'll be right back. You get this electric fizz in the room, or if it's just, and we'll come back to you in a sec, and you flip to the other side of the table. It builds the anticipation to the point where when you come back from whatever you're doing, in this case, going for a wee, then they'll all still be talking about that and they'll still be right where they need you to be, right in that headspace and ready to go. Yeah.
I think that's great. I was going to say puzzles, because giving them something to pick at in idle moments, whether it's a coded message or whatever, that can be useful. But to be honest, I hadn't really thought about how important maintaining momentum is, and how just keeping them in that moment is a really vital thing. Although sometimes I am quite fond of giving people like fireside chats where they can just have a talk that's not planning for a mission or talking to an NPC or anything. They're just chewing the fat and maybe getting a bit of, like personal story development in there. I think that's fine to step away from as well if you're at the table. It can feel discourteous, but when I'm GMing, I feel like I have done my job best when I don't need to say anything for 20 minutes. And in that instance, especially since, you've already said, Bloodless and Baldur's Gate, so their players are lovely, so they're understanding, one would hope. So I think being like, you can have this chat, I'm just going to take care of my, bio needs, then I think that's absolutely valid.
Yeah.
Bio needs sounds like some kind of abstract term that somebody might use in a strategy board game. Oh, well, if you don't sort your bio needs panel out in a second, then you're going to have some bad times.
Yeah.
Just leave your bathroom door open and shout from there.
That is another good tip, yeah.
Just video conference. But yeah, I think in general, like you've all said, most of the time it can be quite nice for people to just get although it might feel, if you're the GM, like you're kind of leaving them hanging. Sometimes it's nice in a game that involves a lot of kind of imagination and kind of creative thinking to just give them a couple of minutes to chat among themselves and kind of not have to react in every moment to kind of get a grip of where they're at and where they want their characters to go and stuff like that. On a more like physical side, you could always get a couple of quick games, like Dungeon Mayhem. Love Letter is actually a really good one, just to fill 5 minutes. Just kind of, it depends how much, it depends on the group really, how much you feel they can kind of come out of that space. But I think most of the time people will be understanding, like we are only human. You can't expect people to spend 5 hours at a table without needing to get up for a drink or a pee or biscuits, stroke a cat, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
All right. Wheels, you've got this document open. Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, so this one comes from a sort of long-time fan of a lot of Gaming Network properties, so it's a familiar face. I think you said here that this was edited down because it was lots of lovely stuff and we had to extract the question out of it. So thank you very much for the message. But Emma Benton asks, what about board games made you fall in love and want to pursue a career in the genre? And was there one game in particular that made you go, yep, this is for me, this is what I want to do with my life? Johnny, any thoughts?
Oh boy, it was pandemic that made me realise that board games could be more than the stuff I'd grown up playing, and I remember being like, "Wow, this is amazing! This is so exciting!" It was actually at a friend's party, like their birthday party, and lots of people were milling around and having drinks and stuff, and 3 of us started playing Pandemic. By the end of the game, we'd pushed the table up against the wall and everyone was standing around it like it was a situation room, and that was amazing. But to be honest with you, it was pen and paper role-playing games for me. Like the minute I played my first session of Deadlands Reloaded, I was like, this is me. This is what I want to do with my life. And to be honest with you, I hadn't really planned to turn it into a career. That bit sort of happened to me, which makes me feel incredibly intensely lucky. But that's sort of how it went.
I think, like as you said, Pandemic is a pretty big one for a lot of people because it's just close enough to that sort of. I think Asmodee have a few properties like that and Ticket to Ride and stuff where it's just close enough to the kind of games people are familiar with that they don't immediately feel, whoa, what is this? What's happening? They let their guard down and like get to experience some actually good mechanics for once. And I think, like, to be honest, like when I was, because I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. So
Whoa.
Yeah, when we played board games, like it got pretty like heavy-handed. So we used to play a lot of Risk, which like I'm pretty sure we also got rid of the rule where you could spend cards to get extra troops. So the games would take like weekends to play out. And like for some reason we thought that was fun at the time. But it was very much like I remember being like not that much younger than the point I was where I fully started getting into games. And we had played a big section of our Risk game the night before over Christmas. And then I came down in the morning and saw Chris, my elder brother, just sort of like studying the board. And I was like, oh God, yeah, okay. This is going to be a long weekend. But I think for me, when I was at university, I started watching Geek and Sundry's Tabletop series, which, apart from The Unfortunate Host, is pretty decent sort of like introduction to like what it's like to play some proper games. And I remember seeing things like Dead of Winter and Pandemic and all sorts of like things I'd never heard of. And I literally remember just sort of Googling best board games. You know, hopefully at that point in the future, people will do that and find Dicebreaker. But I think I came across like a Guardian article of like, here are the best board games right now. And I got Quantum. Has anyone played Quantum?
Oh gosh, not in a long time, but I have played it.
I really love Quantum. I think it's very much like a stripped down kind of like 4X. So it's like a space game where you roll dice and those dice are your ships, and based on the value of the die, it's a different class of ship. So like the lower the number, the better it is in combat, but also the number on the dice is how many spaces it can move. So a scout is terrible at fighting, but can move 6 spaces, for example. And it was the production value on it, like just having all of these beautiful cards and there's these nice little player boards that had little bits where you can put the cubes and you slide your cards under it. It looks like little modules and stuff. I think the production value on some games can be a really big draw for people as well, like especially when people are getting like these huge Kickstarter things of these amazing miniatures. People are like, wow, I want to get involved in this. This looks really awesome.
For sure. Alex Meehan, what board game made you fall in love?
My goodness. Obviously, back in the day, we had Don't Tip the Waiter, which I really don't know what's happened to it. It's in my parents' house, rotting away in some.
Bad advice, by the way. Always tip your service stuff.
But then, just like Mr. Whelan, when I went to university, I fell into a crowd of hobbyists, very nice people, and I would say the 3 kind of defining experiences of tabletop experiences that really kind of got me into playing board games, role-playing games, and then this job were Dominion, which I really love. It's a very bog-standard deck builder, but like obviously loads of games have come after it since its release and kind of done more arguably exciting things, but I just think it's such a fantastic entry game, and it really got me into deck builders, which I think is an excellent genre, despite the blandness of the theme. Betrayal at House on the Hill, which we've already talked about. I didn't think that board games could be, quote, immersive until I played Betrayal at House on the Hill, but it's just such fun, and in fact, it's probably sparked my love of horror board games as well, particularly. I know it's a very overdone theme, but I just think that it can work really well. And Dread, the first time I played Dread, the RPG, I just fell in love. Again, horror, I just fell in love with its ability to kind of really sink its claws into you and genuinely make you feel like, not scared, but like, oh, I'm in trouble. And then, it inspired me to GM my own Dread campaigns, which have gone surprisingly well, considering it's my chaotic nature.
The feeling of, ooh, I'm in trouble is the feeling I get after every sentence I say on video.
Yeah. So those are the games that I fell in love with.
Yeah, over to you, Matt Jarvis. What was your seminal experience?
Go back to the summer of 1965.
What? How old do you think I am?
That was a Johnny Chiodini joke, Meehan.
Yeah. Well, the first game I ever played was Hop Skiddly Doo.
Johnny playing H.G. Wells's Tabletop Soldiers.
With H.G. Wells.
Yeah. For me, I think Pandemic was a huge one. I think because it was cooperative and it was so different at the time, and it was that feeling of like, oh, I have real kind of, there's still quite a lot of luck in it, but you have a real kind of sense of, we can solve this. It's not just, oh, I've rolled badly, that's it. It feels like we lost because of us, even though that's sometimes not the case. I think that sense of just being able to work together on that. The other one I think that was actually huge for me was the Resistance, because I'd never really played Werewolf growing up, or Mafia, or any of those kind of social deduction games. And I remember playing the Resistance with friends and just getting so into the social side of it, where you would stare deep into the eyes of someone that you've been friends with for 15 years and lie directly to them.
Yeah.
Which maybe just makes me a terrible person, but there's that kind of thrill of like, oh, I'm lying for real. Like, this isn't just I'm deceiving you in a game. I'm saying this is a different card. I'm lying directly to your face. This is all about the face-to-face interaction. Related note, my friends don't play Resistance with us anymore because we essentially got to the point where we had played so much that the lying aspects became so kind of savage.
Watson in the background.
And I think the other one would probably be Betrayal again, just because it was that thing of like, oh, it's making stories. You know, it's not about the winning or the losing. It's about and that sounds very like whatever, but that sense of we came out of this with a story that we can say, you know, oh, do you remember that time we escaped from the hungry cat in a tiny toy aeroplane, or we cut down a load of plants, or we escaped the mummies, rather than just, oh, I scored more points than you because points.
It's that kind of thing that people always talk about when they're selling their next video game or whatever. It's like, oh, you know, you'll have a conversation with someone and you'll have so many different stories that they have never experienced. And enjoy telling each other tales. I really resonate with what you said about like agency and stuff in Pandemic. Like it I think is a really big moment when people are new to like proper board games because they've been playing sort of like the old classics that are a bit more just sort of like roll some dice and see what happens. Like, yeah, you make actual decisions now. Like this is you actually sort of like, you know, expressing yourself through play and like trying to be clever and trying to be chancing your luck and all these kinds of things, rather than just sort of like sitting there and passively experiencing something happen to you. You are actually in control. I think that's a big, whether they realize it or not, I think that's a big turning point for a lot of people when they play sort of what we would call proper board games.
Matt Jarvis, one day you'll have to tell us the story of when you first fell in love with a train.
Oh, yeah.
Ride.
Well, that would have been, Ticket to Ride. I can't remember when I discovered Ticket to Ride, but I don't know. It's just, for people listening who don't know, I really like train games. And like train games, I think get like kind of a bad shake because A, they sound very boring, and B, a lot of the people that play them are very dull about them. Sorry, train game fans, but it's true.
Train game fan shocked as Matt Jarvis calls them out on purpose.
I just think
destroys train game fans.
It's like any genre. There's a load of like purists who are like, oh, it should be like this or it should be like this. I think the thing that I like about train games is just it's very satisfying to build a route from point A to point B. Yeah. You know, to lay down track, and it probably comes from playing things like there was a game. Maybe it was called Lego something. It was a Lego game, but you could build sections of track on like a big Lego square. It was a PC game. But it was just very satisfying to build these tracks and then be like, oh, like this all runs and this transports this from there. So
Ticket to Ride is one of the best selling games of all time. You know, it's like, it's that like human little circuitry part of your brain where you're like, oh, I got to join the things up and now there's a big line. Like
exactly. Yeah.
It's
and
really
then like for people who haven't, because I think Ticket to Ride is so well known, but people who play Ticket to Ride wouldn't necessarily call themselves like fans of train games. But I think if there's anyone out there that likes Ticket to Ride and is looking for something that's kind of a little bit more of a next step, Railways of the World is a really fantastic series. And it's very similar. You are just laying down track and kind of moving from place to place, but it just adds a little bit more. And then you step up into things like the 18xx games, which are the most hardcore because they're not about building track. They're about trading stock and things like that. But they're still kind of really fascinating games. The original 1829 by Francis Tresham, who sadly passed away, I think, last year, who also created the original Civilization. And is kind of this is maybe the most... It's kind of the most influential board game designer that Britain has produced. Obviously, you've got Warhammer and whatnot, but created these two kind of massive, influential games in the 70s and 80s. And I don't think many people know his name. So
I think that touches on another thing, though, of like there's a much wider range of themes nowadays to sort of hook people in to their first like board game play session purchase or whatever. Like you don't need to now tell people to play Railways of the World. It's like you don't need to try and make people excited about that.
But gosh darn it, we're going to anyway.
It's really good. Honestly, it's really, really good.
But like, just like the elevator pitch of things now is so much more enticing. Like, because it went from like, oh, hey, we're going to play a board game tonight. And they're like, oh, board games, isn't that a bit childish? And you're like, no, this one's called Ticket to Ride and it's about trains. Like, that doesn't like spark the same excitement as something like even Pandemic, which like still has relatively...
Speak for yourself, Wills.
Yeah,
Matt Jarvis gets pretty excited about trains.
I think if
he's
back
absolutely
in the day, if you
chuffed.
told me that, I would have. Oh, nice. I think back in the day, if you told me like, oh, it's a game about trains, I probably would have dismissed it as kind of boring. But I think, like it goes a long way, like you say, Wills, the themes nowadays. And there are people who they get whingy about licensed games and video game board games and movie board games.
They do
but actually, nowadays they're really good. And the reason that they are kind of reaching that level is because they get people in. Like that's, they can be a great game and then just happen to have, Jaws or the Disney villains,
and there are absolutely like, whilst I'm personally as well, I'm always cautious when I see a licensed product on a box, and I'm like, oh god, is this just a cash in? But like, there like some of my favorite games are licensed to products that I don't give a single crap about. Like Star Wars Rebellion is one of my favorite games of all time. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, as you'll probably see from the latest playthrough me and Jarvis did of Dark Side Rising. But yeah, like I think Rebellion is an incredible game, and it's the kind of thing that I don't really think would have worked with any other theme. And like, it is at the end of the day a licensed Star Wars property, which if you told me that would have been one of my favorite games at some point, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But and as you say, these things draw people in, and if someone manages to play what is an incredibly heavy, incredibly long, and quite sort of finicky and tricky game because it's themed around their favorite film series, then more power to them.
All right.
And if you want to rise in the ranks of train games, contact us now for Matt Jarvis's big train game training plan.
What is wrong with you?
That's dicebreaker.com/
Where does Meehan live?
Take the train.
The rail to riches. By Matt Jarvis.
Subscribe now for $7.99 a month. Unlimited access to Matt's video platform and how to be the best train operator.
Should we do one more very quick one and then let's wrap up?
Yeah. Do a tweet.
Yeah. So, Alex Meehan, do you have this document open?
Oh my goodness! Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you want to read the one from Hannah Milliken slightly further down?
Hannah
Highlighted by our good
Page
friend.
3.
I see it. Hannah Milligan asks, if you had to change one thing about your favourite board game, what would it be? What a fantastic question.
I can jump in here if you're having a think.
Yeah, Matt Jarvis, please take the floor.
One of my favourite board games of all time is Mansions of Madness, the 2nd edition, which is the horror game where you explore various bits of nasty towns and houses and so on, and try not to get squished by a big Cthulhu thing. It's really good. But the worst thing about it is it does a really great job of atmosphere and this kind of sense of mysteries happening around you, and everybody just being doomed basically is often very hard to win the first time through of any of the scenarios. But the thing I really don't like about it is the insanity card. So if you take enough kind of mental damage from seeing kind of nasty grizzlies and just generally having an unpleasant time, if you take enough kind of health damage, you end up wounded and you can't move as far. You've got a broken leg or so on. But when you hit mental damage, you go insane and you're dealt a random objective card, which can often turn you against the rest of the group. And I think, aside from the whole insanity and mental health being used as a gameplay mechanic, which is in itself problematic, that aside, just mechanically, I find that those cards kind of just sap the energy out of it, because these scenarios are so hard to begin with. Having someone turn against the group And often it will be like, oh, you just need to spread fires, or you need to do something irritating. And it just kind of separates them out. It's not like Betrayal, where you then get a traitor and it's exciting and it's this kind of us versus them, because the whole game builds to that point. You know, in Betrayal, you don't have an enemy until the traitor is revealed. But in Mansions of Madness, you already have something you're trying to achieve. And it just kind of feels like a distraction. And mechanically, it just is frustrating because it doesn't work. And yeah, I'm not a fan of it at all.
I think my favourite tabletop game is Doomtown Reloaded, the collectible card game that's set in, or it's a living card game really, set in the Deadlands universe. And like in Deadlands, I love hucksters and I love sort of all the occult dark magic stuff that they've got going on. And there's a faction very much based around that in Doomtown. They're called the Fourth Ring. But their whole aesthetic is like they're a circus act. So they've got like a big top and a ringmaster, and they've got lots of creepy clowns, and you know, it's like, oh, we're all sideshow freaks, and I hate that. I think it's naff, frankly. And there's so much more they could be doing with hucksters in that game, I think. Like in the original Doomtown, before it was rebooted, you know, they had the Whateleys, which are like, you know, the basically the royal family of these occult magicians in Deadlands. And like one Whateley does turn up in Doomtown Reloaded, but it's still within the foil of this like, it's a kooky circus, aren't we creepy? And I just don't like it. So if I could have my way, I would redesign the Fourth Ring. Sorry to Fourth Ring fans out there, including my friend Joe. But Sodom, Sloan Gang forever. That's me.
I think I would ask for the next sort of edition of Cyclades, if it just had some kind of built-in speaker system where you could just hit play on the Edge of Mythology soundtrack, so it just automatically did it for you.
Yeah, I own Cyclades, and that is a big oversight, actually. There aren't any buttons to press at all.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird.
No cassette soundtrack. Bring back the kind of like
Yes.
80s thing of chucking in a cassette with everything.
Yeah.
Hell yes. I genuinely, to be fair, like I think like board games coming with their own soundtracks is actually really helpful. One of my favorite things to do with any board game is to make sure there's thematic music playing in the background. No, I'm going to put the Red Dead soundtrack on whenever we play Bang, the dice game. Like it's sometimes it's just that added element of just like getting people in the mood. So to be fair, yeah, I think it would be quite cool if they all came with little soundtracks of their own.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've been really struggling with this because whenever someone's like, think through your backlog of games you played and try and think of very specific parts of them, my brain is like, yeah, sorry, cannot produce that information on the fly. I would say that I'm often an advocate for mechanics that other people, namely people who take board games very seriously, I'm often an advocate for those mechanics that they don't like the guys were talking about earlier with unbalanced mechanics. Usually I completely on board, I'm sure to the surprise of absolute no one. One perfect example of this is a board game called, oh my goodness, now Shadowhunters. I love Shadowhunters. It's a Japanese board game published by Z-Man Games.
So the weird spiral one.
It's the one that's got really weird art that's kind of manga-ish.
Everyone's like a letter on a spiral, and that's your health tracker. Yeah, I think I played that.
And it's possibly the most stupid game ever made. It's also one of my favorites, and I play with a group of people there are some people there who potentially would hate it for how stupid it is and unfair it can be. And initially their reactions were like, well, this is ludicrous, I'm out of the game now, what do I do? And then they realized how quickly the rounds were, and by the end of a single evening they were like, I feel like I've had an out-of-body experience. And now we all are like Shadowhunters fan club. I suppose the one thing I'd change about that game wouldn't be the mechanics, it'd be the art, because there are a lot of, pretty much all the women in it are like, unfortunately, drawn to be basically sexy. whereas like the male characters are all very bizarre, and they kind of range from like a guy who I think he's like a religious figure who's clearly immoral, and then you've got like a scientist person who looks a bit goofy, but then all the women are basically like ranges of here's a woman in a sexy outfit, here's another one. So yeah, I'd probably change that.
I think there's something to be said that a lot of games out there, I would like them a lot more if they changed their art style.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Give the princess a better fitting dress.
It's all come back full circle, folks.
Even better, put Batman in the dress. It solves both problems.
Oh
it makes
God,
Batman
yes.
more interesting as a character.
I finally got you, Joker. No, I'm Catwoman. You can let me go now.
Please
Sorry.
take my clothes off.
All right. Let's wrap up there. But let's quickly let the folks know what is coming up on Dicebreaker. Video team, would you like to go first?
Well, we just released the first episode of Spinebreaker, our playthrough of the Worldwide Wrestling RPG. It is hilarious. It almost ripped my throat in half. Playing it. And it's we're going to have a new episode every week, which Johnny is working on. The stock music that we found to open the video is also incredible.
Oh
it's
my God.
like classic like bedroom guitar rock. It's so good. So good. So look forward to that. But there's plenty more stuff, Johnny.
Yes. Well, we are. So when this airs this very evening, if you're listening on Friday the 3rd of April, from 7 till 9 p.m. BST, we will be streaming for Lost Odyssey, which is basically a series of RPG games in aid of charity. And so we're going to be playing a game called, because the theme this year is Champions, and they asked me what the title was going to be, and I went, I know. So it's Champignons of the Arena. So expect mayhem, expect mushrooms, expect to raise money for a very good cause. If you're listening to this in the far-flung future, there'll be a VOD available on youtube.com/Dicebreaker. Also coming this weekend, there is the continuation of Dungeon Breaker, which is our D&D series, and also we really love playing with the name of the channel, Dicebreaker. I believe will be going up. If not, then something else will be going in instead. But that is Alex Lowley's making lovely board game pieces from her pokey but actually quite nice kitchen.
If we stretched this brand any further, it would be a form of torture against the Geneva Convention.
Well, I mean, we've yet to start a weekly news bulletin about the best board games for low costs called Price Breaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's
let's not start this because we'll be here for a very
watch this
long
space.
time.
Hey, how about the website though? What's coming up on dicebreaker.gov.uk?
I mean, you start with a pun as a name of your site. It's only downhill from there, really.
Mm-hmm.
So on the website, we had quite a few questions actually on Saturday about people asking for games to play while they are in lockdown, whether they're by themselves or whether they're with one other person or kind of a small family or group. Luckily, Dicebreaker.com has a bunch of lists and recommendations written by Alex Meehan and Sarah Elsom and the rest of the team as well. Actually, everyone kind of chips in here and there. They're games that we, actually rate ourselves. But there's lists on just kind of the general best games that you should play. There's the best kind of solo games if you're just by yourself and you're looking to get into that. There's 2-player games, there's family games, there's beginner board games, as we kind of said about. There's a whole load of recommendations. There's also a guide up at the moment on playing across the internet. So we've mentioned Tabletop Simulator, but there's quite a few different options. If you've watched some of the channel, you'll see us playing role-playing games over kind of voice and video chat. But there's just a guide to getting started with that stuff really and where to go. So hopefully, as I say, we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but hopefully if you're looking for recommendations along those lines, we've got something that will kind of suit you there.
Yeah.
We've also, I
was going to say, if you've been keeping your eye on Dungeons and Dragons related information,
Always Alex Meehan.
Oh yeah, Eye in the Sky for D&D. I've got a thoughts piece on one of the most recent D&D sourcebooks released, Guide to Wildermont, Explorer's Guide to Wildermont, which is based on the Critical Role video series.
Never heard of it.
I like it. And yeah, so that will be going up soon, so keep an eye out for that. If you want to learn whether it's worth getting, whether you're a Critical Role fan or not.
Yeah, and it's worth saying if you're looking to pick up D&D for the first time, there's also a load of guides written by all of the team about how to, again, just where to start, because sometimes it's not that obvious if you know of D&D, but you're like, what do I buy first? Is it the player handbook? Is it the GM guide? So yeah, go and check it out. And Magic the Gathering and all of that kind of thing. Although Magic the Gathering, particularly hard at the moment unless you're playing on Arena. But yeah.
Very true.
But essentially, the website's got a lot of stuff on it. If you're looking for games, we'll have something for you. And all these lovely folks will be there as well. So come on over. But I think that about wraps it up for our first episode of the Dicebreaker podcast. We'll be back next week with more of the team. But for now, thank you, Johnny Chiodini.
Thank you, Matt Jarvis.
Thank you, Wills, Michael, Will and Wills.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you, Alex Meehan.
Cheers.
And thank you, dear listener.
I've been Matt Jarvis. Everyone stay safe out there. Stay in touch with folks. Look after yourselves. And yeah, together we'll make it through this one way or another. But yeah, be safe all. Right, we'll be back.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.